This is the case of Henry Caldwin, the quiet accountant who lived on Maple Drive, in the bedroom no one ever left alive. Victims like Marissa Lane, the missing student, David Cross, the delivery driver, and Samuel Reed, the private investigator who got too close, all vanished inside those walls. Their stories form one of the darkest mysteries ever uncovered. Before we dive into this chilling case, make sure you support the channel by subscribing and staying active. Your support helps us keep bringing you powerful true crime stories like this one. The house on Maple Drive had always carried an air of quiet menace. It wasn't falling apart or abandoned, but there was something about it that unsettled anyone who passed by. The curtains were never opened, not once in years, leaving the windows like dark eyes that watched without blinking. The yard was plain, the paint on the walls still fresh enough to seem normal, but the silence around it was unnatural. Children walking to school crossed the street to avoid it, and even delivery drivers admitted they felt uneasy when they had to step onto the porch. Neighbors whispered stories, sometimes brushing them off as silly gossip, yet none of them could deny that there was a pattern they couldn't explain. What made the house more disturbing was the sense that it was both visible and invisible at the same time. Everyone knew it was there, but few ever saw anyone go in or out. Occasionally, a shadowy figure could be spotted behind the frosted glass door, though no one could describe the man clearly. He was always careful to remain faceless, just a presence that slipped back inside as quickly as it appeared. At night, strange sounds carried through the walls, thuds, dragging noises, and muffled movements that were explained away as pipes or old wood creaking. Yet the unease spread like a slow poison. People sensed that something about this home was different from any other on the street. It became a landmark of fear, the kind that was passed down in hushed warnings. Teenagers dared each other to walk up to the door and knock, but most couldn't go through with it. Parents told their kids to keep away, though no one could give a reason that felt concrete. Over time, Maple Drive became defined by that single house, a place people instinctively avoided, as if some part of them already knew the danger hidden within. The unease surrounding the house turned into something more sinister when the first disappearance was tied to it. A college student named Marissa was on her way home after a late-night study session at a friend's apartment just a few blocks away. She was diligent, always letting her parents know where she was, and the type of person who rarely broke routine. When she didn't show up the next morning, alarm bells went off immediately. Her car was found parked neatly at the curb not far from Maple Drive, locked and untouched, with her schoolbooks still on the back seat. The police traced her steps and discovered that her phone signal stopped abruptly near the front gate of the mysterious house. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. Search dogs were brought in, and their noses led them straight to the porch. They circled, barked, and scratched at the wooden steps. But once the front door was opened, the trail went cold. Officers combed through every room, looking for anything out of place. The living room was spotless, the kitchen gleamed, and the bedroom upstairs seemed staged. Bare walls, a bed with perfectly tucked sheets, and no personal belongings lying around. There was nothing that tied Marissa to the house, no clear evidence that she had ever stepped inside. With no fingerprints, no signs of a struggle, and no body, investigators had nothing to hold on to. The case frustrated detectives, but it terrified the neighborhood even more. People had whispered about the strange house before, but now those whispers carried weight. Friends of Marissa swore she would never have gone in willingly. Rumors grew that the house swallowed people whole, that once you stepped through its door, you were gone for good. The silence from within made those fears feel all the more real. Marissa's disappearance might have been brushed off as an isolated tragedy, if not for what followed. Within a year, another person went missing under eerily similar circumstances. This time it was a delivery driver, a man with a steady job and a reputation for punctuality. His van was discovered just 2 streets over from Maple Drive. Engine off, doors locked, packages still stacked neatly in the back. Witnesses reported seeing him carrying a parcel toward the very same house that had already been linked to Marissa. He never returned to finish his route. Once again, the police searched the property, and once again, they left empty-handed. As time passed, the neighborhood learned to expect the unexplainable. A handyman vanished after being hired for a small repair job in the area. He told his supervisor he was headed to Maple Drive for the call, but after that, nothing. Then a journalist who had been digging into the earlier disappearances went missing too. His notes ended mid-sentence, with his last recorded stop only a short walk from the dreaded house. Each victim seemed unconnected in life, yet their final known steps all converged on the same location. Investigators were baffled by the lack of physical proof. Each search of the house turned up nothing but ordinary furniture, sterile walls, and a bedroom that looked strangely unused. The police grew wary of returning, aware of the public pressure but frustrated at the lack of answers. Behind closed doors, some officers admitted the place felt wrong, as though it had been scrubbed of human traces deliberately. To the outside world, it became clear that these weren't random disappearances anymore. They were part of a disturbing pattern. Maple Drive was no longer just a quiet street. It was becoming a hunting ground cloaked in silence. The truth about the bedroom began to reveal itself only after investigators returned with more advanced technology. For years, the room had appeared too ordinary, almost staged, as if meant to hide something beneath its surface. When forensic teams brought in ultraviolet lights and chemical sprays, faint traces of blood appeared in places invisible to the naked eye. They followed the evidence to the walls, and it was there that the most unsettling discovery was made. Layers of thick paint covered deep scratches carved into the plaster. Some scratches looked random, but others formed recognizable shapes. Letters, initials, fragments of names that suggested desperate attempts to leave a final mark. Each carving told a silent story of struggle, trapped inside four walls that had been carefully polished to erase every trace. Beneath the floorboards, the secrets ran deeper. Tiny bone fragments and strands of hair were found wedged in the cracks, remnants that had been overlooked for years. A silver ring, dulled with age, rested beneath one of the wooden planks. When shown to families of the missing, it was immediately recognized as belonging to Marissa, the first student who had vanished. That single object confirmed what many feared. She had not simply disappeared. She had been in that room. The discovery turned the quiet bedroom into the most important piece of evidence in the case. Investigators realized it was not just a space within the house, but the very heart of the mystery, a place where victims had been silenced forever. What unsettled everyone most was the cleanliness of it all. Each detail had been hidden with precision, as if the room was never meant to betray its purpose. It became clear that the bedroom was no ordinary space. It was a carefully constructed trap disguised in plain sight. Henry Caldwin, the man behind the locked doors of the Maple Drive house, lived in a way that made him almost invisible. To outsiders, he appeared perfectly ordinary, even dull. He worked as an accountant at a small firm, where colleagues described him as polite but forgettable. He never drew attention to himself, never lost his temper, and never shared much about his personal life. His neighbors saw him mowing the lawn at odd hours or taking out the trash in silence, and while they found him unsettling, there was nothing overtly threatening about his behavior. He blended in so well that people rarely thought twice about him, until the disappearances pointed straight to his doorstep. The deeper investigators dug into his life, the stranger he seemed. Records showed he had no close relatives, no history of friendships, and no long-term relationships. His bank statements revealed a routine existence, with expenses limited to groceries, bills, and occasional hardware purchases. It was as if his entire life had been stripped of anything personal. Yet, despite his bland exterior, the timing of his arrival on Maple Drive raised suspicion. He had moved in just weeks before Marissa vanished, and every disappearance since seemed to trace back to him. When questioned, Henry always seemed prepared. He produced receipts, time-stamped parking slips, and security footage that placed him away from the scene whenever someone went missing. These airtight alibis frustrated detectives, making him appear untouchable. Still, the evidence inside his house began to chip away at his carefully constructed mask. The carved initials in the bedroom walls, the blood traces, the hidden ring, each pointed toward his guilt. Henry's calm demeanor was no longer seen as harmless. Instead, it became chilling, the surface of a man who had mastered the art of hiding monstrous acts behind ordinary routines. The investigation reached its breaking point with the arrival of a private investigator named Samuel Reed. Unlike others, Samuel wasn't tied down by protocol or limited by red tape. He had followed the case for months, convinced that Henry Caldwin was hiding something that police could not pin down. Determined to expose the truth, he decided to take a risk that no one else had dared. He would go inside the house, not just for a search, but to stay there overnight. Before entering, he carefully installed small hidden cameras in corners of the bedroom and vents, devices designed to capture footage silently in the dark. His plan was simple: wait, watch, and document whatever unfolded. On his first night inside, nothing happened. The silence was heavy, broken only by the creaks of the house settling. Samuel remained patient, reviewing the recordings the next morning and finding nothing unusual. But on the second night, something changed. In the early hours before dawn, Henry entered the room. He carried ropes, tools, and a small box, his face calm and expressionless. He sat quietly on the edge of the bed for hours, as if waiting for someone unseen. The camera captured every detail, including the moment Henry returned dragging a terrified victim into the room. The footage revealed the truth beyond any doubt. Henry had been using the bedroom as a carefully prepared chamber for his crimes. Samuel's cameras documented it all, but tragically, Samuel himself would not live to see the evidence exposed. Days later, he was reported missing, his belongings abandoned. It was only when police returned to search the house again that they found his hidden camera equipment tucked away in the vents. The recordings told the story Samuel couldn't. His final investigation had cost him his life. When police reviewed the footage left behind by Samuel Reed, there was no longer any room for doubt. The videos showed Henry Caldwell entering the bedroom with tools, restraining his victims, and moving with chilling calmness, as if performing a routine he had perfected over time. The discovery of this undeniable evidence pushed the case into action. Armed with warrants, officers prepared for a raid that would finally put an end to the mystery that had haunted Maple Drive for years. The operation was carefully planned, with teams surrounding the property at dawn. When they forced their way inside, Henry offered no resistance. He stood in the doorway, expressionless, almost as though he had been waiting for them all along. As investigators combed through the house once more, they found what had been overlooked in previous searches. Beneath loose floorboards and inside hidden compartments within the walls were boxes filled with personal belongings of the missing: jewelry, wallets, watches, and scraps of clothing that had been carefully stored away like trophies. Each item was cataloged and later matched to one of the victims, connecting Henry directly to the disappearances. What unsettled the officers most was his reaction. Confronted with the evidence, Henry never spoke a word in his defense. He didn't protest, didn't deny, didn't attempt to explain. Instead, he smiled faintly, as though satisfied that his secret was finally revealed. The quiet man who had lived unnoticed for so long was unmasked as a calculated predator, one who had built his crimes around patience and silence. The neighborhood, once frustrated by the lack of answers, was now shaken by the reality that the man they had passed by every day was responsible for a string of horrors hidden in plain sight. After Henry's arrest, Maple Drive became the center of a spectacle no one could ignore. News vans crowded the street, reporters broadcast live updates, and curious onlookers gathered to glimpse the house that had become infamous. Police sealed off the property with yellow tape, declaring it a crime scene, and began the painstaking process of dismantling every inch of it. What they uncovered in the final days of the investigation was more disturbing than anything seen before. Behind the far wall of the bedroom, officers discovered a concealed doorway hidden beneath layers of plaster and wallpaper. It led into a narrow passage that twisted into the darkness like a tunnel deliberately built to be unnoticed. Inside, they found what could only be described as a hidden tomb. Skeletal remains were stacked in corners, carefully arranged as though Henry had organized them over the years. Dozens of victims, far more than anyone had ever suspected, were identified through fragments of clothing and personal belongings left behind. The sheer scale of the horror shocked investigators and confirmed that Henry's crimes stretched back further than the first officially recorded disappearance. Forensic experts worked tirelessly to recover and document the remains, but many victims would never be fully identified. The revelation turned Henry from a neighborhood oddity into one of the most notorious killers the region had ever known. Families of the missing were devastated, yet relieved to finally have answers after years of uncertainty. The house was eventually condemned, its walls torn down in an effort to erase the memory of what had taken place inside. Still, the legend of Maple Drive endured. People spoke of the bedroom as if it were cursed, a place where silence turned deadly and escape was impossible. The finale was not just deadly, it was unforgettable.